One thing I learned about people is they love looking at math. They love seeing it. They don't like doing it up here, but they love a calculator. And if you want an interactive pricing calculator using the power of JavaScript, Webflow, and also Airtable to send it directly to the people playing with it, I've got a little treat for you. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made a site that uses sliders, user input, JavaScript, Airtable, all to make a pricing calculator that you can save the package and send it directly to your users. The inspiration behind this site, like a lot of interactions I've learned over the past couple of years, is through Timothy Ricks, who I'm forever grateful for his amazing educational content on YouTube. He did a site called Mac and Puya that had a pricing calculator for a wedding photography business, and I ended up actually having my own client who wanted to do something similar for her interactive installation business, something that had interactive buttons with it, to give clients like one interaction within the website and two like a way for them to understand her pricing. So it was a great base to just like follow from and play around with. For the clonable I made here, it's going to be a photography studio pricing calculator, and there's a sort of flow to it. One is, first of all, Webflow form with JavaScript, so we're going to use JavaScript to make the calculations and Webflow form to contain it all in. The second thing is logic. When a user submits the form, we're going to make sure Webflow Logic sends all of that information to our third party, which is Airtable. So Airtable is going to have a database of all of those inputs, the emails as well, and every time a new row is created, we're going to use Airtable automations to send that email to that new form inquiry, new client, new package, I guess it would be called. So that's it, and I'm going to show you how I made it, because a lot of people cloned this one. People just really like calculators, and I can't blame them. Math is so fun. So this is the finished website. Over here we've got our calculator. This tells you kind of what's going on here, and if you go along this slider and change your number of products, the total will change as well. So it's like $30 per project, and I think it was also $30 per photo. Yes. And then GIFs are a little bit more. If you want to have a producer, that's going to be a lot more, and change the price here. So these are like little check boxes that change the price as you click them. And if this is kind of what I wanted to do, I could send it. If I wanted a little more information, you can hover over each of these to give you a little more information on, you know, what a producer means, that kind of thing. And if I wanted to send it over, I can put in an email here. Let's say misophoto@photo.com. And if I send it over, I get an all done. And then over here in Airtable, a new row is created with all of that data. And then an automation is created that sends that person an email through Gmail. So that's a quick overview of everything that's going on here. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how we do this calculation. So I'll hop into Webflow. So what's going on, if you were to clone this, you would see that this whole calculator is set up as a form. And that's so that we can send each of these inputs to an email and kind of off to something else. The way Webflow Logic works at the moment is you can have a trigger be a new form or a webhook. So in this case, it made sense to have that form to send the information to. Now, if you look at this form versus kind of what's on the live site, you'll see a few things are missing. The first would be the numbers in here. There's supposed to be a number here and the number at the bottom. And that's because that's all being generated with JavaScript. So when I use this on the live site, the JavaScript is kind of what's changing those numbers, and you won't be able to see that until you publish your site to the live site. So that's kind of why we're not seeing it here. But as I was building this out, it was really important that I name all of these fields a correct number. Like this one's named photos. This one is the number of products. This checkbox is hand model, if you know what I'm saying. Also, just an aside, that these checkboxes are also checkboxes. They're just styled to look like little switches here. If you want to hop into the code, you can see how I did that with the backgrounds here. Last thing on this view, all of these are native Webflow form things. Like these are all checkboxes. This is a field. This is a field. This is the submit button. It's just placed over the field. The only thing that's custom code is this range slider because there isn't a slider native to Webflow. So if you open this up, you can see its input type range. I have a min, max, and a value here. On input, I'm calling a function, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I've also given it an ID so that I can target this later within my custom code. But that is that. I've also given all these text fields unique IDs so that I can target them within the code as well. So that's this. So now that that's talked through, let me show you the code. One quick thing before I get into the code of this, I just want to say that like I am not a master coder or anything. Webflow is a no-code tool, but I have learned a lot of code just from using this tool and having all the easy stuff out of the way with HTML and CSS and kind of getting to get deep in the weeds with JavaScript and that kind of stuff. So that's my opinion. I think code is fun. Don't be scared. You can make really fun calculator things like this. So I'll show you how I did it. The code lives here within pages and then within settings down here at the bottom, but because this is like kind of tiny and hard to read, I'm going to show you within this kind of Notion document here. And so this will be the same code that's within the Webflow project. So when doing JavaScript, the first thing you want to do is set up your variables. So here I've kind of set aside all of the different things that are in the Webflow project. So I've targeted the slider, given it a name, all of the inputs. So that's everything that's not a checkbox. So that would be the photos, the GIFs, the number of products, and the total number here at the bottom. So all of those numbers that change on input. There's the checkboxes, so these are all of the things that change with just like a yes or no answer, so a checked or unchecked answer. And then here at the bottom, I just set some defaults. So I have a little console log here just to make sure that everything's working. And then on page load, I've given some set values to each of these things. So if I refresh this, you can see that the number of products is 1, the number of photos is 1, and the total is 160. And we can also see that in the code here. So products input value 1, photo input value 1, given value 0, and total cost value is 160. How I'm arriving at this number is I said, okay, so I want a base price of $100. Products is going to be $30 a product, and photo is going to be $30 a photo. So it should always be 160 at a minimum. So that's kind of how I arrive at that number, and I just set it as a default when it loads. So for this first little function here is the step counter function, and what that is anytime I click this plus button or this minus button, this number changes. And this code applies to both of these things. So I've named these little buttons so that whether you are doing this one or whether you're doing this one, the same functionality is applying here. And that's because it's doing the parent of this minus or plus input. I pulled this code, which is some jQuery code from a codepen thing, because I wasn't entirely sure how I would do it myself with just plain JavaScript. It's probably really easy, but this is just how I did it. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about this, but you know, it's a plus or minus function. You're adding or subtracting a number to here and making sure that it is above 0. That's one little thing here, is you can't do like negative photos or negative GIFs, but it will go up infinitely. So you could have just like an egregiously high number of photos to do, which would not be great. But you probably could put a max on this if you wanted to. Anyway, the thing that was really fun to do is this calculation function. So the way this is working in Webflow is that anytime any button is pressed, any checkbox, this slider, any of these buttons, a function is running. And that function checks if any of these have been pressed and performs the calculation. So I'll show you that code here kind of step by step. So the function is called calculate change. The first thing is that the product's input value equals the product slider value, and that's just making sure this slider aligns with this number. So that is always checking for that. And This first section here is all of the inputs. So like I said before, there's sort of the checkbox fields and then there's the number fields. So the first thing it's calculating is all these number fields. So to show you what that looks like in practice, $100 is our base cost, photo input value times 30. So we said each photo would be $30. Each GIF is going to be $80 and each product is going to be $30. So it's always checking if any of these have changed value, and if it has, it makes that calculation and adds on. The next is all of our checkbox fields. So that's an if statement across these different checkboxes. So if studio is checked, that's going to add 1,000. If producer is checked, that's going to add 1,000. You can kind of see each of these and you can add as many as you want to have these different kind of, if it is yes, if it's not, no. But if it's just kind of checking if it's true, and if it is, then it adds the appropriate amount here. I've also added this. I could probably take this out. This was just for troubleshooting. But just for funsies here, if I click inspect and I hit console, yeah, you can see that anytime anything is being clicked, oops, a change happens in our console. So that's what's going on here. Finally, the last thing is we got to call the function. So anytime any of my inputs are changed, so I'm using onChange for that trigger, I'm going to call the function. And there might be a way to like bulk do these, but I don't know of it. So if you know, let me know. But for now, this is kind of what it looks like. And another thing that I mentioned earlier is for this range slider, I, within the code itself, put on input calculate change. So that's what's going on here. I probably could have put it in the code, but it was also just easier to put it in the HTML embed. So that's what's going on here. This is for something else. That was when I was trying something else. I don't even think this matters. Anyway, pretend the code ended here. That's it. That's all the code that's being used for this calculator. And yeah, it's really fun, really easy. And now I'm going to show you how all of that gets sent to Airtable with Logic. So quick note, Webflow Logic at the time I'm making this is still pretty new. I'm pretty sure it's still in beta. When I made this, it was definitely still in beta. So things may have changed from the time I am recording this, just to put that out there. But I'm going to show you how I built this with Webflow Logic. So if you have Logic, it'll be over here to the left with this little fun icon. If I click on this and then click on flows, you can see that I've created a flow here. Now, when you start a new flow, you can kind of choose what you want to run it on, a form submission or a webhook. So I've clicked form submission and I've chosen the custom package form. And the next thing I did was drag over this block to here to make an HTTP request. One thing I will say is before this, I did not have a ton of experience in APIs, which is to say I had about like none experience in APIs. I don't know if that makes you feel worse or better about this, but it makes me feel better because it meant that I jumped into this pretty quick and was able to figure it out without too much trouble. So just wanted to get that out of the way first. So when you are making a new HTTP request, I'll kind of put a new one in here just so you can see. It'll let you name it. So that's what I've done here. I just called it create row in Airtable. Authentication, you're going to choose for this kind of thing, you'd choose API token, and you would add it to the header, and then you would add a new credential for Airtable. So I already have mine in here. So once you make it, it kind of sticks in there. I am going to delete this and just kind of show you what I have set up here. So how did I figure out that I was going to do all of these settings? So when I set this up, I knew that I wanted to create a new row in Airtable. So I knew that first of all, I was going to need that Airtable API, and then I needed to figure out what call I needed to make, what request method I needed to make to create that row.
And to do that, we would need to step into Airtable API stuff. So let's get ready to go to Airtable API land. Now, if you look up Airtable API and you're already logged into your Airtable, when you open it up, it'll show you like specific API documentation for your specific bases, which is awesome. So I'm going to open up this Miso Photo Studio base, and in here, if I click on the exact table I want, pricing package form table, so that's what's over here, I can see all of these different requests I can make. So I know what I want to do is create a record. And over here, it says I need to issue a post request to the pricing package form. So that is why I've done post here. I also know that in the header, I'm going to need to do an authorization with Airtable. And up here, I can see exactly what that's supposed to look like. So it's supposed to look like authorization, bearer, your API key. So when I set up my API token, that is what I put in there. So I can kind of show you if you want to add a new one, you just put in the name. That doesn't matter as much. The token here is kind of what you're concerned about. When I did it, I put bearer and my actual number for my API key. So I did that, all of that. I don't know if I needed to, but that is what I did. If you're looking for your API key, Airtable makes it pretty easy to find it. I'm sure you can find that without too much trouble. And then the next thing is there's a second header here. So I needed to add content type, application JSON. So I added in a new header here. So you would just put that here. And then the last thing you need is the URL. So here, that would be right after post. That would be this fun little URL right here. So I copied that and pasted it into here. Good stuff. And then finally, here is the body. So this is kind of where the most errors can happen in my experience. The first thing you should probably do is just copy what happens after data. Just copy all of this, whatever you have in your table, paste it in here without anything connected, and then just run a test. And if you run the test and it's all good, then you can go ahead and add these in. I'll show you, but make sure you just run that test first to make sure that everything is kind of good to go, because I can do all of this. So you run the test. We'll find out if it's working. It's successful. Let me tell you, the first few times I did this, it was not successful. And it would say status 400, and then you would have to check this to see what exact error went wrong. Sometimes it just, the name was wrong, or I was missing a bracket or something. It was usually something pretty small, but that's what Google and troubleshooting is for. So that's my experience there. If you hit apply data, it'll just apply it to the rest of the flows if you have more. I don't really, so I'm just going to hit cancel. But what happens here is if you have sample data in here, like if I just copied and pasted this over, it would just say like this. And so I would come in here, highlight each of these, get rid of it, and then in this little purple thing here is where we start having fun inserting our variables. So I know this is going to be email, so I'm going to choose the right form field, email here. Here I want total amount, so I'll go to form field. It's going to be a number, so that'll be total cost, number of products, and then you just kind of go down the line and fill out each of your thingies. But I'm just going to go back to how I had it before. Pretty great. And whenever you're done, you can hit apply changes. Make sure they apply. You can test them too as well if you need to. I think you actually have to test them before you make it live. But once you test this, you can make sure that it was received here. Like this is the one I just did with all the number ones, and it was put in here. And I know it's working because I tested it in Webflow Logic and it sent to Airtable. So that connection is working. The last thing in order to send whatever's going on to this exact email is you're going to open up automations in Airtable. So whatever your base you're in, you can click here on automations and you can create a new automation. So you're going to choose a trigger. For this one, it is when a record is created, and my action is going to be send email. Another way that you could do this if you have Airtable Premium is to just send an email from this, but I do not have Airtable Premium, so I used this integration that just uses Gmail to send those emails. So with this, it's really easy to put a subject. I send it to the email that's in the record. So it's not just sending it to any email, it's sending it to that exact email. You could also send this email to yourself if you wanted to, if you're the person kind of creating this campaign. And the last thing is the message. So I put in the little variables here. So it tells you the number of products, number of photos, GIFs. One thing that I haven't quite cracked is for these checkboxes, the data, when it comes in as true or false. So that's also what it is in the email. There might be a different way to do that, but for now, that's kind of what it is. And down at the bottom, I have the total amount. So you could put in whatever you want in here. Right now, it's just like, this is a fake studio. So yeah. So that's that. So you can see I received this just 3 minutes ago, and it is from me to me and shows me what my package looks like. So you could customize this to your heart's content, but yep, that is what is being shown here. And that's how I made it. It's really great. If you like it, let me know. If you want to try it out, clone it. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. And yeah.